First days can be hard, trust me on that one. Whether at school, university, or work, there's always the ice-breaking / awkward / hazing experience that everyone has to go through before you get accepted into the gang. For example, at my first ever job working in a car salvaging scrapyard, my air quote friends put a broom handle through the arms of my jumpsuit and raised me on a car lift for an hour. That was fun. Yeah, that was fun. Gave me a lot of time to think about how I was going to systematically destroy the lives of all of them. Anyway, messing up on your first day is always going to be part of the experience as well. After all, you don't know what's what yet, and everything is a learning process. Now take that and magnify the amount of things that you can mess up to the extreme, as today we're going to be talking about directors who cocked up their first days on their projects, in some cases almost to the point where the film in question was put into jeopardy. This isn't like forgetting to make Mike's tea extra milky like he likes it. These are multi-million-pound decisions gone wrong. So let this mistake called Jules tell you about some others, as this is Whatculture, and these are 9 directors who really f***ed up on the first day of filming. Number 9. Matthew Vaughn almost drowned the cast and crew. Kingsman: The Secret Service. Director Matthew Vaughn is no stranger to tough productions, having famously started shooting X-Men First Class just 10 months before it was released in cinemas. But the production of Kingsman: The Secret Service was almost a lot more strenuous because some of the cast nearly died. For some reason, the first day of shooting was the rather tense rising water scene during Eggsy's training sequence, all of which required meticulous planning and training to complete safely. The set was actually computer calibrated in order to be effortlessly lowered into various depths of water quickly and safely, but the computer malfunctioned, immediately plunging an unsuspecting cast and crew 20 feet below water. In Vaughn's own words, camera, sound guys were in waders full of water, panic, everyone's diving in and pulling people out. Those actors weren't acting, they were absolutely terrified. It was awful for the first day of filming. Thankfully, nobody was injured and the rest of the shoot reportedly ran smoothly, though surely a first day where your employees genuinely fear they're about to drown is about as terrible as it gets. Well, almost. Number 8. Paul W.S. Anderson's negligence left a stunt woman with serious injuries. Resident Evil: The Final Chapter. Say what you will about Paul W.S. Anderson's Resident Evil movies. Okay, I will, after the first one they're pretty shy. But Anderson and company reliably brought shooting to an end on time and within a sensible budget, allowing for strong returns at the box office for nearly all of the franchise. But the 6th and final film in Anderson's franchise was marred by tragedy and disaster from its very first day, when stuntwoman Olivia Jackson's motorcycle was hit by a camera crane, leaving her in a medically induced coma for 2 weeks. Jackson's injuries included a degloved face, crushed facial bones, cerebral trauma, a severed neck artery, broken ribs, a paralyzed arm which required amputation, and much more. Unfortunately, day 1 wasn't the only nightmare the crew had to contend with, as near the end of shooting, crew member Ricardo Cornelius was crushed to death by a Humvee in a second accident. Honestly, no jokes here, as that is an awful and horrible way to open and close a project, and a mark of personal failure for Anderson, which he'll soon not forget. Number 7. Lynn Ramsay doesn't even show up. Jane got a gun. Say what you will about the other directors on this list, but at least they turned up for the first day of shooting. This wasn't the case with Lynn Ramsay, who was set to shoot the Natalie Portman starring Western Jane Got a Gun when, without any warning, she simply no-showed on day 1. The cast and crew were already assembled for shooting, and so the producers quickly scrambled to find a replacement, settling on Gavin O'Connor the very next day while the cast were left to rehearse their parts. The precise nature of Ramsay's issue remains a matter of contention. The director has cited creative differences, while the studio claimed that she was drunk and abusive to the cast and crew, leading to each party suing the other and settling out of court. Ramsay's departure also had a knock-on effect of sorts, with Jude Law quitting the very next day, as he had only signed on to work with Ramsay in the first place. Shooting eventually started roughly 2 weeks following Ramsay quitting the project, though it wasn't until a month later that Ewan McGregor signed on as Law's replacement. Unfortunately, this isn't a tale that concludes with a happy ending, as the film was, at its very best, just entirely forgettable. Number 6. Paul Verhoeven struggled to direct a nervous Sharon Stone. Basic Instinct. Beyond the obvious basics of keeping your cast and crew safe and, actually turning up, any director worth their salt needs to know how to effectively work with cast members and get the desired performances out of them. Veteran filmmaker Paul Verhoeven came curiously unstuck on the first day of filming for his hit erotic thriller Basic Instinct, when a nerve-wracked Sharon Stone gave a performance that was called wooden, in Verhoeven's own words. so much so that there was talk of recasting the part altogether. The first day of shooting was deemed a wasteful disaster, but before he was done for the day, Verhoven pulled Stone aside and gave her a pep talk about her ability to execute the performance. Thankfully, Stone turned up to set the next day re-energized and confident, and the rest is history, going from wooden to, well, a scene that probably caused wood of a different nature. Number 5. George Lucas fought against nature and lost. Star Wars. As wonderful as the original Star Wars might be, the early days of its production in Tunisia were nothing short of nightmarish. Even ignoring the fact that the crew had to be put up in subpar accommodation due to overbooking, the first day of principal photography was an absolute train wreck. In addition to malfunctioning droids, a massive storm tore through the set on day 1, preventing the iconic twin sun scene from being shot as planned, and also leaving many of the production vehicles and equipment stuck in the mud. The twin sun scenes was eventually shot a week later, but an even larger storm created further problems for the crew deeper into the shoot, reportedly giving Lucas enough of a headache that he decided to let other filmmakers direct his sequels. Suddenly it makes sense why The Empire Strikes Back was so bloody brilliant, right? In a sense, that terrible first day may very well explain why Lucas insisted upon directing the prequels in a sterile green screen environment where he could control every variable. So thanks, nature, you might have been the reason why we got such absolute tosh which fans still try to defend to this day. Number 4. Randall Miller defied shooting restrictions and got a crew member killed. Midnight Rider. And now for a first day of filming so abjectly reprehensible that actually resulted in the movie itself being cancelled. The William Hurt starring Greg Allman biopic Midnight Rider got off to a historically terrible start when, while shooting a scene on a railroad trestle bridge, assistant camerawoman Sarah Jones was killed by an oncoming freight train. The production had not received clearance to be shooting on the trestle, causing not only Jones's death, but also the injury of numerous other crew members. Shooting procedure was immediately investigated, while director Randall Miller hired a PR firm to handle damage control in the hopes that shooting could swiftly be restarted. Amid mounting pressure from the worldwide filmmaking community and a lawsuit from Allman himself, the decision was eventually made to pull the plug on production. The next year, Miller pled guilty to the felonies of involuntary manslaughter and criminal trespassing and received a 10-year sentence, of which he served just 1. Number 3. Roger Spottiswoode couldn't stop arguing with the film's writer. Tomorrow Never Dies. As much as the James Bond movies might appear to be well-oiled blockbuster machines, it transpires that from behind-the-scenes stories, the production of is anything but. While Quantum of Solace famously saw Daniel Craig and director Mark Forster rewriting the movie during shooting due to ongoing Writers Guild strikes, at least in that case there was a clear connect between the filmmaker and the material. That sadly wasn't true on the Pierce Brosnan starring Tomorrow Never Dies, which started shooting without a script anywhere close to being finished. Stories tell of the cast and crew literally showing up and not being sure what to shoot. Legend dictates that the various cast members were arguing with one another as a result, and neither Jonathan Pryce nor Terry Hatcher were happy with their roles as written. From day one, the director battled with writer Bruce Fierstein. And this led to an anonymous crew member stating, "All of the happiness and teamwork which is the hallmark of Bond has disappeared completely. Is it any wonder why the finished product felt so lackluster as a result?" Number 2. Richard Stanley failed to tame Val Kilmer and an anxious studio. The Island of Dr. Moreau. Richard Stanley's 1996 cult sci-fi horror is one of the most famously troubled productions in cinema history, and it was all downhill from the very first day. The movie was a major passion project for Stanley, whose eccentric personality nevertheless made New Line Cinema pretty nervous. Their relationship with the director began to crumble as Stanley's main ally, Marlon Brando, was absent from the start of shooting due to the suicide of his daughter. Making matters worse, Val Kilmer was 2 days late to set after learning on day 1 that he was being divorced by his wife, further straining relations between Stanley and New Line Cinema. The studio simply felt that the production wouldn't run smoothly, and they were totally right in fairness. By day 2, co-star Rob Morrow quit the film amidst rewrites and inclement weather prevented filming from continuing. By day 3, New Line fired Stanley by fax, replacing him with the veteran director John Frankenheimer, who despite his skill couldn't rescue the obviously doomed production. Honestly, there should be a whole video dedicated to this, as there's even more that went on that I simply don't have time to talk about, but in short, this was not a fun project to work on. And number 1, Jeff Canoe made Robin Williams pull a no-show, Dead Poets Society. Right up until the original first day of filming, the Robin Williams starring classic drama Dead Poets Society was going to be directed by Jeff Canoe, best known for helming 1984's hit sexy comedy Revenge of the Nerds. However, Williams wasn't terribly keen about letting Canoe take the helm and so just didn't show up for shooting, despite intense pressure from Disney and the cast and crew already being assembled on location with fully built sets. I mean, talk about making a statement, right? This resulted in the original production being scrapped, the sets being burned down, and poor old Canoe was left without a leading man-shaped paddle. Shooting eventually restarted with final director Peter Weir, and the rest is Oscar-winning history. Though on one hand, Canoe can't be entirely blamed for Williams' absence here, the fact that the production was about to get kicked off without first securing its leading man is madness, and for a moment it looked like the world was never going to see one of Williams' best films.